Welcome back to Beyond the Uniform. I'm Justin Asiri. If you are new, welcome. Each week on the show, I interview military veterans about their civilian career, what they do, how they got there, advice for others seeking to do the same. We have over 300 episodes, pretty crazy, 300 episodes completely free and on demand on our website and on iTunes. If you're listening to this is our Saturday episode, which is completely different. We call it Behind the Uniform. It is simply me with a microphone and a sticky note, which today has maybe 7 or 8 different items. And I try to do this off the cuff and try to do it every Saturday. And I am doing this one because if I don't, my mom is going to text me because she notices when I miss these ones and encourages me to keep going. So thank you, Mom, for that. So I'm going to do this in our traditional format. We call it the mullet format, business up front, party in the back. Today I've got 4 different professional thoughts for you. And then I've got in the party in the back 1 or 2 different personal thoughts. And feel free to stay for as little as much as you would like, as little or as much as you would like. So the first thing that's top of mind is an interview that I had today, and this one won't air until mid-October. It's with the Wounded Warrior Project, and the gentleman Tom Kastner had served in the Army for 30 plus years before going on to work at Mercedes-Benz and work at Amazon and all these great organizations prior to joining the Wounded Warrior Project. What I appreciated about this interview is when I saw his bio on paper, it's fairly intimidating. And what was refreshing was how much he opened up about the mistakes he made in his transition. For example, at Mercedes-Benz, he really approached it with the communication style and leadership style that worked for him for 30 years in the military. And that really fell flat at Mercedes. And he was extremely senior. He was a general manager there. And so he talked about that. He talked about how he had to learn these new things and how painful, honestly, that was. And so I appreciated his candor. I think that sort of honesty allows us to go a lot deeper. And I know that many of you are going to benefit from his story. The other thing that I just really appreciated is learning more about the Wounded Warrior Project, which honestly I've seen their billboards, I've seen their advertising, I'm well aware of them. But to go in detail, 2 things that stuck out to me. One is their resource center. And one of the most common things that I've heard from members of the military is how confusing it can be to sift through 21,000 different organizations out there and figure out what they need to figure out who can help them. And what I love about the resource center at the Wounded Warrior Project is they have people on the phone who are there to help you with whatever challenge you have. And that sometimes may be sending you to a different organization. And I love that. And I also respect, my impression is they realize the challenge that they're tackling. They understand that they can't do that alone. And so they are funding and partnering with different organizations to get there faster. They're partnering with hospitals across the United States. They're partnering with a tremendous breadth of organizations to provide the support necessary. And I think that's a different approach from most organizations I see, myself included, which just try to do everything on their own. And I really respect how they are cooperating and redirecting to make sure the problem gets solved without this sense of competition that won't help things. Second interview that's top of mind that I did recently, and this will air in October as well, is Jason Jackson. And Jason's in Omaha. He works in politics, but, and this is a little bit embarrassing for me to admit, he is not an elected official. He works for the governor. And that, in truth, is what most political jobs are. Most jobs in public service are not elected officials. And so I really appreciated our conversation first for shedding light on the incredibly vast and diverse career options that would be really compelling for veterans to pursue that are in the public service sector. And I had never thought of them, never heard of them, and he does a good job of shining a flashlight on them. So I'm excited for many of you to consider these. And then second of all, I just really appreciated Jason's story, and the impression I got is that he is just constantly putting his head down, doing his best work, and knowing his values. And as he marches forward, different opportunities pop up, and he's honest with himself about how good of a fit that would be, and he's willing to take risks when it is a good fit. And make sure to listen to that episode. I just think that the way that he tells his story is a really cool tactical approach to career, which is, in my view, self-knowledge and serendipity and openness, really driving some exciting opportunities. And he'll go into detail on his own story of how each of his different jobs at Intuit, he worked in the private sector for over 8 years before going into public service, and in public service, how each of those came about through non-traditional means. The third interview is with a non-veteran, but a gentleman called Paul Smith, who is an expert in storytelling. And this is an episode for everyone to listen to, because if you've listened to the show before, you realize how much of one's career is storytelling. Interviews are all about storytelling. Even promotions can be driven by storytelling. He has authored 5 best-selling books on the topic. We get into the nitty-gritty of how to construct a story that's compelling, that will drive action, and one of those actions may be giving you a job. So I loved that aspect. I'm a big fan of storytelling. But the other aspect that I loved is one of his 5 books is about storytelling for parents. And he really makes the point clear in both business and personal settings how storytelling is such a more effective way to create change and to influence behavior. And that's very true in my life. When I think of the things that have really motivated me or guided me, it's not academic knowledge usually. It's much more that emotional story that I carry with me for decades. And so in his parenting book, he provides a lot of what I'll call hip pocket stories you can have in your back pocket to share, both to be able to share those with your kids or to inspire you to think of your own story, but they're rooted around common values that we want to pass on to our children. And so I love that thought. You know, my son is only 7 months old, but I love as he gets older, the deliberate storytelling around values that I really believe in, hard work or perseverance or integrity. And what better way for me to impart that to him rather than just saying, hey, it's important to tell the truth, complementing that with really well-crafted stories that drive those points home. So keep an eye out for Paul Smith's interview in October. One last professional point before we move on to the personal. This was just an idea I had today, literally while I was interviewing Tom Kastner. For those of you who've listened to these other episodes, you know that I do this year-long men's program called the Embodied Men's Leadership Training. It's an in-person and online group of 55 guys doing some personal work together. And one of the mainstays of the group that I hated at first and have come to love is a private Facebook group. And in that private Facebook group, people can post questions, open up about challenges they're facing, share advice, connect with others. It's something that I use now on a weekly basis, and it's been very helpful. I had the thought of potentially opening up a Beyond the Uniform private Facebook group. And what that could allow is audience members to interact with each other. It would be a kind of scalable way for me to interact with you. I love the thought of being able to float upcoming interviews, seeing what questions you have, sourcing that, kind of getting more real-time feedback, as well as being able to help out in different things. I was trading emails with Steve about some career thoughts, and I thought, man, we could actually kind of scale that up through Facebook. So let me know. We would do that free. We would do that open to anyone who served in the military, but I'd want to have some sort of filter to make sure that people are coming for the right reasons. But if that's of interest, drop us a line. You can find me on LinkedIn or justin@beyondtheuniform.org or the Contact Us page on our website. Let me know what you think about that. If we get a response, I'll move forward with it. If not, I'll take that as a sign of not worth the effort right now. So on the party in the back, a few personal thoughts, and both of these come from maybe three thoughts. One comes from a men's group that I do here every other Thursday in Denver, and then two of them come from the program that I'm doing with people all over the world, I guess. There's Hong Kong gentlemen and a couple from Australia. One of the kind of homework assignments that we had that I have loved is we had to post a video to this private Facebook group. And in that video, for 30 seconds to a minute, we had to answer repeatedly the question, what I don't want you to know about me is fill in the blank. And a couple things that I took away from this. I've done a lot of work with these men in person and online, on video and on the phone, almost in some cases daily, but for the last 6 months. But watching those videos, I felt closer to, and I felt like I understood more the men in the group than any single thing that we've done. What was surprising for me, as many men opened up about things about which they have shame, things that they did maybe even decades ago that they might not have told anyone before, is how much vulnerability most often, or at least for me, draws me closer to someone rather than repelling away. I think the story that I tell myself, I'm sure the story that these men told themselves is, if I admit that I did this, if I admit that I behaved in this way, if I share this mistake that I made, if people saw me for the way I really am, then they won't love me, they won't respect me, they won't trust me, they won't want to be friends with me. And I can say without exception, and some people really opened up about things that you would never hear someone admit in public. Every single person who took that risk, there's not a single person where I'm like, oh man, I'm going to avoid that person. In fact, the opposite. The more that I really see them, the more I want to be closer with them, the more I want to know them, the more I want to understand them. And I just think it's something I've been thinking about for the last 2 weeks. It is so opposite to what I feel. Like I have these feelings of like, if people don't see a perfect image of me, if people were to know the way that I really am, then ... And it's never good after those ... But it's been a powerful example of that the opposite, at least for me, has been true in the members of this group. And I'm not suggesting you just kind of post rampantly on Facebook. This is a safe container, a group of men who have agreements around confidentiality. Like there's a lot of structure here to support this. But I think with those people that you feel safe with, your partner, your family, your close friends, I would encourage you to experiment with sharing whatever it is you don't want them to know. Maybe you're having doubts about your relationship or your job. Maybe there's something that you feel guilty about, even though it happened years and years ago. I would encourage you to experiment with that in safe places in your life. The other aspect of this that I think other people might relate to is it made me realize how different my story of who someone is, how different that is from what's actually going on. For example, one of the men that I view as the most confident, as the most well-connected, as the most, seemingly at ease in our group, opened up about how he didn't feel connected, how he didn't feel like people liked him, how he didn't feel confident. And again, it was a kind of a wake-up call to me to remember that I think more often than not, the story that I tell myself about people is inaccurate. I will be certain that I know what someone's thinking, what's motivating their behavior, what's going on behind the scenes. And then in these rare instances when you get a glimpse of the actuality, I realized wow, I'm not actually that good at it. So it was a good reminder for me to try to drop that story about other people and maybe be a little bit more curious about what's actually going on for them rather than just judging them based on my perception. The other one, and this kind of goes along with that, we have these small groups in this men's group. And my small group meets about every other week. And we meet for about an hour and a half by video, and we just kind of talk about what's going on in our lives. And one of the, I was saying something about my day, and I said something just off the cuff, which was about my schedule, how I kind of go to being open to being very closed. And I said something like, "Oh, F the people who want to get on my calendar. I don't have time for that." And I went through all this stuff, this long, tirade. And one of the guys in the group was like, "Justin, when you said that, I felt like I saw you in a new way. I actually felt like I trusted you more when you were showing a little bit of anger there, which is something I don't often do." And so that prompted the voluntary homework assignment of posting a video to this private Facebook group of 90 seconds of rage. And it was as uncomfortable as it sounds. And so literally, and I added on to that for myself that I was going to do it in one take. I was not going to sit there and edit and try and get it right, which is something I try to do. And the two things that I took away from that were pretty surprising was, first of all, the response of other men in the group. Again, this is me, in my view, showing myself at my worst, showing myself in just uncontrolled rage and anger and ranting and raving about all the things that I hate in the world. And to hear, and I do trust this from them, that they actually trust the part of me that's experiencing emotion fully, the part of me that's actually open and not controlled and not calculated, but just really being myself, even when that might be the part of me that I think is the ugly or untidy part of myself. So again, it was this theme of man, everything in me tells me to hide this part of myself. And yet, the truth of what I'm experiencing is a deeper connection with men, a deeper trust with them when I share more of myself, not just the pretty parts. And the other piece was I felt fantastic. After I got over the fear of posting it, I felt fantastic. And the fear that I'd actually accidentally posted it to my main Facebook page instead of this private group. That was a big one. But I felt great. Just letting vent to all of this bottled up rage felt great. And if you've listened to these episodes before, you've heard me talk about another exercise of just taking a little wiffle bat and just mashing on a pillow for 30 seconds or a minute. That'll move some energy too. But just throwing that out there, I know that's kind of strange and maybe not easily able to replicate, but it was powerful for me to see just how powerful it is to let go of some of these emotions that we keep kind of tucked away and bottled up. Last one is in our last Thursday's men's group here in Denver. It was, this is all kind of in the same theme, but one of the guys in our group had a pretty rough upbringing. He went through a lot of abuse as a child, and that, as you can imagine, had a very big impact on his behavior growing up and just a lot of things that he's done in life. And he's had a lot of progress with our group and with therapy and with other things of healing that, of coming to grips that it wasn't something wrong with him, that his parents, it was their own flaws that led them to physically abuse him, and how he is, still got a long way to go, but is overcoming social anxiety, is overcoming rage, is overcoming these things. And I didn't know it when he was sharing this, but the gentleman who's new to our group, who was seated next to him, who's much younger, also experienced similar abuse. This guy went off for maybe 15 minutes about what was going on in his life and what he had been through. And for me, it was almost like, honestly, like watching a TV show. It's so distant from my own experience. It's just hard to imagine being a young child and having the parents who are supposed to protect me, like physically abuse me. Like that's just very hard for me to get my head around. And so for me, it was almost like wanting to contribute to him by just giving him space to just share that and be seen for it. But the guy next to him shared, he's like, oh, that's actually what you shared is 100% my experience. And it was just kind of crazy for me to think, this first gentleman had the courage to share and trust about what his life experience was and where he's at with it. And the impact was someone who he didn't know, who had shared that experience, felt connected, felt like he wasn't alone, and was able to see, someone who has been working at this longer than him, someone who's maybe a little bit more reconciled with that part of his past, and was able to learn a lot from that experience. And so, that's definitely something that motivates me with this second part of the Saturday episodes is I think we have, oftentimes very different, but oftentimes very similar experiences. And the experience of being open and honest about what we're going through, what we have gone through, can be really helpful for others to hear. And that's one of the things I love. For me, I get them in these men's groups. Other people get them at church or at therapy or book clubs, so many different vehicles to find that. But I think there's a lot of power, not just in receiving that support, but sharing as an act of generosity because someone else may be encouraged by what that experience is that you went through. And that was true too. One of the guys opened up about a lot of challenges he's having currently in his relationship, and took a lot of courage for him to admit that, rather than just everything's fine and gloss over, or I don't want to share this right now. And part of the group was just about giving him space to freely express what he's going through without judgment. And part of the group was able to commiserate of the challenges that all of us face in relationship. And being able to see that load lighten. What's that old phrase? It's like a burden shared is a burden halved. There is a truth to that of like as you share, as you have the courage to open up and be vulnerable about something you're experiencing, even if someone doesn't offer the solution, which I don't really believe people can do, even just hearing it and being seen by others can remove a tremendous amount of pressure. So that's all for this week. Let me know on the private Facebook group. I will be back on Monday and Thursday every single day this month in September with new stories of military veterans about their civilian career, and hopefully, fingers crossed, back next Saturday for another Behind the Beyond the Uniform episode. Take care.